Hello and welcome to the Little Knowledge podcast. We're back again. We've squeezed one episode into May. We like to do one a month, don't we, Goff?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, Goff's here, as you can see.
Greetings.
And I'm here as well, Paul. So thank you very much. Hey, Goff, did you know that until yesterday, as of recording time, we had the terrifying amount of 666 subscribers?
Swat me sideways.
Fortunately,
it's the podcast of the beast.
But we're safe in a way, because fortunately someone actually watched one of our videos after subscribing and clearly left in disgust because we're down to 665 now. So, hey, at least we haven't got that number hanging over us.
Yes, we averted the unpleasantness of that, yes.
yeah, there is that. This is an odd one. Well, it's not an odd one. Why do I always say that? There are two odd things about Maindiff Court that we're going to talk about. When I say odd, I mean little mysteries, really. I mean, its most famous guest we'll talk about later, which was, of course, Rudolf Hess during the Second World War. But you probably think of it as the mental health hospital, don't you?
Yes.
So Maindiff Court, if you're local, near Abergavenny, it's the mental health hospital. And it was when Hess was there, to a certain extent, and a prisoner of war, I think, reception facility. But before that, Maindiff Court, there was a country house on that site. There was a mansion on that site called Maindiff Court, but another building completely. Owned by the Baileys.
Oh.
So we're going to have a little look. First of all, we'll do what we always do at this juncture. We'll get our very hard to read map up until I zoom in. There we are, Maindiff Court.
Oh, yes, there we go.
So to pull out, you've got Abergavenny here. A lot of houses in this area. A lot of our podcasts have been around the Abergavenny area. You know, Coldbrook Park is down there, and we've got quite a few. And Maindiff Court, here we are. So this is how the mansion looked back at the turn of the 20th century. So as always, we'll see the footprint of the current hospital. So there's the current hospital.
Oh, yeah, not big. There's a lot of new builds there.
There's the mansion. So they've basically built on the site, I suppose you could say, but the mansion is, a lot bigger. But it's in this sort of site, the old mansion.
Yeah.
When we're talking old mansions, Maindiff was a manor very much like Pencarn was. And there's evidence it goes back to the conquest, Maindiff Manor. So it's been owned over the years by a lot of the big families familiar to people who've listened to these podcasts, such as the Jones family, who had links with Philanthropy Court. And inevitably, perhaps, the Duke of Beaufort owned the manor of Maindiff for a while as well. Like it's clearly, you know, he owned practically everything for 5 minutes, didn't he?
Yes.
The Owen family were resident at Maindiff Court in whatever, you know, there are no images of Maindiff Court from the early 19th century, but the Owen family were there. Then in 1856, it pops up because John Williams, who lived there, wandered out near his gate, near his farm, and found Eliza Jones breaking his fence. And so he ran up to Eliza Jones and he asked her, "Why'd you break my fence?" And she replied, strange reply really, that she had done it before. There is no explanation why Eliza enjoyed breaking that particular fence as a regular pastime, but she appeared to have done it. But the reason I mention this is they arrested her. She was charged, and because she couldn't pay for the fence to be mended, she was given 1 month hard labor.
Good grief.
Hard labor for breaking a fence. Mind you, she did obviously break that fence on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
But
give it a damn good breaking.
I don't know what she had against the fence, but there we are. But yeah, so this is where it is. Now we're going to have a look at, because what happens is the Baileys take over.
Right.
The Baileys take over.
These are the Baileys of Pontypool?
Well, this is...
beg your pardon, Merthyr?
Well, you're on the right lines. This is Crawshay Bailey.
Crawshay Bailey.
Who was the nephew of Richard Crawshay of Cyfarthfa Castle.
Cyfarthfa Castle, that's it.
Richard Crawshay was the one who walked all the way to London to get a job. You know, Richard Crawshay was. And Crawshay Bailey and his brother Sir Joseph Bailey basically took on things at Nanty Glow Works. The Nanty Glow Ironworks, I mean, one of the great works of the day, Nanty Glow. And he also, Crawshay Bailey, took over the Rumney Ironworks. He was the one that built the tramway from Rumney to Baselig. He was the MP for Monmouth Boroughs. He was one of the great ironmasters, basically, Crawshay Bailey. He also had an engine, Goff. Did you know this? Crawshay Bailey had an engine. Do you know that old 19th century song?
No, I don't know.
No, some people still know it, although it seems to have changed over the years to Crawshay Bailey had an engine, but the original was clearly Crawshay Bailey had an engine, and some suggest it was based, because he was also interested in railways, but one of his engines got stuck in a tunnel, and great hilarity, you know, Crawshay Bailey, Iron Mask got stuck in a tunnel. Anyway, it goes something like this, as far as lyrics-wise. It starts off in a reasonable fashion. Crawshay Bailey had an engine. It was always wanton mending. And according to the power, she could do 4 miles an hour. And the chorus is, did you ever saw such a funny sight before? Not did you ever see, as people who sing it now put. The original, it was a play on Welsh and English. So it's, did you ever saw such a funny sight before? Then it goes on again reasonably. On the night run up from Gower, she did 20 miles an hour. And she whistled through the station. Man, she frightened half the nation. Then it starts getting personal. Crawshay Bailey had a daughter who did things she didn't oughter. She was quite beyond the pale, but over that we'll draw a veil. And then they're so eager to have a dig at Crawshay Bailey that by this point, it all falls to bits. You know, what they're trying to achieve, it falls to bits. Yes, Crawshay Bailey, he did die, and they put him in a coffin. But alas, they heard a knocking. Crawshay Bailey only joking. Well, the devil wouldn't have him, but he gave him sticks and matches for to set up on his own at the top of Barford hatches. And then as this goes on into the 20th century, it becomes rugby clubs get hold of it. Yeah. And rugby players do sort of verses of their own.
Oh, dear.
So we have this, and the only reason I mentioned this one is because it could indeed be mentioned. It could even be someone related to you, because it goes, Crawshay Bailey's cousin Morgan played a very large organ. It was long and it was narrow, and he wheeled it in a barrow. So you can see how this developed over the years, can't you? Old Crawshay Bailey.
Oh, dear me.
Alexander Cordell, not a fan of Crawshay Bailey, who puts him as a very villainous person in a couple of his novels. History suggests he was slightly over the top with his painting of him as an ogre, but nevertheless, Crawshay Bailey certainly had his detractors of the day. He lived, there we are, Nanty Glow House. That's where he lived initially.
Yeah.
He married. He found love as well. But he married, but this is part of the problem. He had a daughter, Jane, with his wife, and then he had a son with his housekeeper.
Oh, blimey.
Only one son, Crawshay Bailey Jr., with the housekeeper, Sarah Baker. And Sarah Baker died at the age of 44, 3 years after giving birth to Crawshay Jr., but she stayed in the household. So I don't know whether he kept it from his wife or whether it was an arrangement.
Yeah.
So Sarah Baker was his housekeeper, continued working for the old man and gave birth to his son and continued to.
Yeah.
So he wasn't sort of put away on a cottage on the estate, continued, according to the census, living in the house.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
It's an odd sort of arrangement.
Yeah.
He then moved. When he gave up, he made a huge amount of money from the industrial life of South Wales. And he did move in retirement, again, near Abergavenny, Lanvoist House.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Lanvoist. It's in a good nick.
Yeah.
A luxury house. It's still, it was up for sale, or at least a bit of it was. You know, a lot of these old houses get compartmentalized, don't they?
Yeah.
Into flats and things like that to see if you could sell them better. But there he was at Lanvoist. You know, when he died, when the old man died in 1872, and he reached the age of 83, pretty good age back then, in 1872, even his will was slightly insulting to his children, but not just Crawshay Jr., his illegitimate son, but also to Jane, his daughter, because he said he left them the money, but he left them to my reputed children. So did the old man wasn't even sure whether Crawshay Jr. was his? Is that what he's trying to say with that?
Well, yeah, possibly, yeah. Well, the daughter wasn't.
The daughter wasn't either.
So
he's having a dig there at both his wife and Sarah Baker. Unless I'm reading it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, especially the kids.
Because it almost delegitimizes them almost, doesn't it? My reputed children. How strange.
Yeah. Well, luckily,
very odd man.
Well, Junior here, Crawshay Bailey Jr., did get all the money, so that was fine. And he had a good marriage. The lady he married was the Countess Bettina, daughter of the Count of Metaxa, born in Cheltenham.
Yeah.
Well, Count Metaxa is actually a 17th century Venetian title.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then it got taken into the Greek, and her father was actually a rather strict admiral in the Royal Navy, Elizabeth Countess Bettina. So Crawshay Bailey Jr. married her, and they had 2 daughters, Clara and Augusta. None of this reputed nonsense. She had a loyal Bailey Jr. here. And he was quite, by the way, his father might have said things in the will, but it didn't stop Crawshay Jr. from restoring the nearby church and in his father's name, and he's buried there at Llanboist at the church there. So he did a bit for his father, his slightly ungrateful father. And Crawshay Bailey Jr. also paid for the church at Llandowie Skirrid, St David's, and he spent £2,000 on that, which was an awful lot of money. Paid for the village hall at Llandowie Skirrid as well. So he did do his bit. He was a Freemason. He was High Sheriff of Monmouthshire, Deputy Lieutenant, the usual business.
Yeah.
These people always end up, don't they? And he was very interested in fox hunting. Again, this is a networking thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, same sort of thing, yeah. So if you could ride to the hunt, you could make connections.
Yeah. He had his own pack, which was an expensive thing to do, but he wasn't interested in industry. All that coal and iron, he was now a landowner, and he would develop the Bailey estates, which came to about 12,300 acres in South Wales. So he was sort of looking after the estates. He needed a new house, though, because the old Maindiff Court with the clearly dodgy fence
yes,
wasn't enough for someone of his wealth. So what he did was he built a new mansion. And in 1873, we know that the workers are in. In 1874, we know the painters and decorators are in. So by 1875, 1876, we know he's in this new house, and this is what it looked like. Maindiff Court.
Oh, right, there we go.
The mansion and home of Crawshay Bailey Jr.
Crawshay Bailey Jr.
He had a good conservatory here, where his gardener, Mr. Harding, you couldn't get him out of the conservatory. He was always there. So much so that basically he would write letters as Mr. Harding, Maindiff Court. Because if the letters went to his house he was never there.
Yeah.
But we used to win all sorts of prizes for hothouse flowers and agricultural shows. It was that sort of thing. Let's face it, if you're into fox hunting, Freemasonry probably doesn't hurt as well, and you go to the agricultural shows, that's what a Monmouthshire gentleman did at that time, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Pretty much.
You were up to how they made, because these people, they occupied all the dominant positions within the county, and they socialized exclusively between themselves, and they married exclusively between themselves. So they were really a totally separate group of individuals within the county that ran and owned everything.
well, this is true. I mean, his daughter Augusta, or their daughter Augusta, shows this. She was married off to Sir William Curry of Itton Court, Chepstow. So you marry your daughter off to another local aristocrat. Clara, the other daughter, was, I say married off. Some of these may well have been a love match, but the pool in which you were fishing
was small.
It was a small pool. Now, Clara married Mr. Canning of Hartpury House in Gloucester, just over the border. So yeah, you're quite right. That is what they did. The house itself, there is a photo of one of the interiors that survived, of sort of the entrance hall.
Oh, how very interesting.
It was quite a nice place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
And he did open it up for entertaining. He did love entertaining. And they'd have things like Eisteddfods on the lawn and pageants and things like that. Oh, and the military would turn up because he was in the Brecon Volunteers. So he was also known as Captain Bailey.
Yeah.
So they would march up, they would march up in the ground. There was quite a lot of grounds at Maindiff Court at that period. So you probably think that things are going, fairly well. He's got his wife,
Yeah.
the Countess Bettina, very glamorous. He's got his 2 loving daughters, as far as we can say, or Augusta and Clara, and that's all very good. And he's a good philanthropist. People of Abergavenny will know this place very well. This is Bailey Park.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I recognise those gates, yeah.
Yeah, and they're great. They're double wrought iron gates that Bailey and Crawshay Bailey Jr., he bought the park and he gave it to the people on a 25-year lease, I think it was. And he decided it would be good for various sports. He put a keeper in charge of it to make sure everything was fine. And that was all well and good. And you can see here, the plaque is still up there in 1883. Crawshay Bailey II, better than the original.
Yeah.
Released the Priory Meadows as they used to be. So that's interesting. The Priory Meadows.
Yeah.
Now, he spent £2,000 on it, and you can see what this plaque then says. In 1894, the town purchased the park for £5,000.
Yes, yeah.
Now, that's not him
No.
making the profit there. It's his trustees.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the councillors believe that Crawshay Bailey dropped off the twig, which we'll be talking about soon, not long after he gave Bailey Park. He died, and then a few years later, when the lease was starting to wind down a bit, the local authority, the council, thought, well, I'm sure that what Mr. Bailey meant to do was to give us the park.
Yes, yeah.
And the trustees appear to have said, oh, I'd think not. So that's the story. Some newspaper articles say that the trustees, the Bailey estates, actually made money on the deal. However, I've seen bits which said that the Baileys actually put money towards it. So I don't know entirely how that works. But maybe the Baileys, maybe that means that Crawshay Bailey put the £2,000 in and the estate made 5,000, maybe.
Could be.
So the philanthropic spirit didn't quite continue after him when it came to
quite
the estate. You can hide under being trustees, can't you?
Yes.
If they'd come up to Crawshay Bailey, if they came up to Goff Morgan and then he'd say, oh, Mr. Morgan, thank you for that. Would you mind giving that park to us? Would you do that? It's your name, isn't it? It's your name in the papers. You'd say, yes, of course.
Yeah, of course
if it's a trustee, then it's an organisation saying, no, give us £5,000.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Kind of dehumanises it. Anyway, Bailey Park is still there, and Crawshay Bailey Jr. has his blue plaque. And there we have our mystery.
Oh.
Now we have our little interesting... And I've tried to read so many books, and no one has a theory other than the obvious one, perhaps, which we'll talk about. 1884, he gives... he's done that park in 1883. He's still a young man. He's only about 44, 45. Compared to his dad, who was 83. And he seemed to be in good health. And then he vanishes. Disappears. He goes traveling. He goes to America. He doesn't stay in contact, as far as we can make out, with any of his family or any of his friends. He just goes. And we don't know why.
Yeah.
Now, ordinarily, when things like this happen, we tend to think it's financial. They run off to France. They try to avoid creditors.
Yeah.
However, in this case, that's not the case. He was loaded, as his will shown. He was lots of cash.
Yeah.
So we don't know why he suddenly leaves Maindiff Court, leaves his family behind, leaves his friends behind, and disappears to America. And for 2 years, people don't hear from him at all. To all intents and purposes, he's vanished.
Yeah.
Very strange. And in 1887, he seems to crop up again in Ireland. He's in Ireland. He's at a place called Monkstown, which is sort of Dublin Bay area. And he's seen walking around there. He doesn't go to hotels. He doesn't go to clubs. He isn't known. You wouldn't know he was there.
Oh, good Lord.
So he's keeping a low profile.
Yeah.
Occasionally somebody sees him walking along the promenade. It's all very pleasant.
Yeah.
Walking along the promenade rather slowly, as if he has some kind of illness.
Oh,
Um,
right.
There's a lovely view. He's spending his time there at Monkstown. He takes a place 3 Brighton Terrace. But again, even his family don't seem to know he's here until on a Friday evening, his health took a change for the worse. And he sent a cable to his agent back in South Wales, the agent of the Maindiff estate, Mr. Trevennan, to come at once. I'm in Monkstown. I'm at 3 Brighton Terrace. Come at once. So Mr. Trevennan drops everything, gets on the mail packet to Kingstown, and he rushes there. He arrives on the Sunday, 6 a.m., and he rushes to this house, which has been restored since this photograph has been taken, which is 3 Brighton Terrace. But it's too late. Crawshay Bailey Jr. had died at 4 a.m. that morning.
Gosh.
Now, the newspapers say... Now, what Trevennan had said to Elizabeth Crawshay back at Maindiff in South Wales was, look, I'm going to go over there. If he's in a really bad state, I will wire you and you can come over.
Yeah.
But clearly, he didn't wire his wife, did he? He wired the agent.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So I don't know I honestly don't know what's going on here. So he's dead at, I think he's 46, 47. So they bring him home. And he's buried at the church at Llandowie Skirrid. So he's buried there. And he's actually got his mother buried with him as well, Sarah Baker, the housekeeper.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is nice. So she died in 1844, so he's buried next to his mum, which is a nice move. No relative, apart from his daughters, attends his funeral.
What on earth is going on?
The wife Elizabeth in the newspapers, the excuse is made that she is prostrate with grief. She hasn't seen him for 3 years.
Yeah.
Only the daughters are at the funeral. I've got no idea what's gone on. So you think, right, okay, well, maybe, what did he die from? Well, let's have a look at his death certificate. So here we are. So Crawshay Bailey, 3 Brighton Terrace, 1887. He dies. And he dies from... It's so hard to read. This is a problem. Chronic, is that renal disease?
Yes.
Chronic. So that's what? Kidneys?
Yeah, kidney failure, chronic renal disease, yeah.
But what's this? Poisoning. Is that arsenic poisoning 3 days certified? What does that word say?
I think it is. I think it is arsenic. Arsenic poisoning.
Poisoning 3 days. Which is actually the 3 days when his health declines.
Oh,
so
what?
That's what I mean. That's why I said this is a mystery. What does this mean? We could say that the renal disease is why he's walking slowly on the promenade. He's probably gone to Ireland for his health, right? He's got a beachfront property, beautiful County Dublin. You got the Dublin Bay. He's not going out because he's ill. Maybe he doesn't want to worry his family. Maybe he's been ill and he got this diagnosis. He panicked and he went off for his health for 2 years. But again, not to tell anyone at all is unusual. And then we've got this. Arsenic poisoning 3 days certified. Does that mean he's taken the arsenic for the renal disease?
Well, yeah, without knowing what he was being treated with. I think was used an awful lot of things in the Victorian period when the major causes of killing people off.
So I don't know, maybe someone watching this has an explanation or can read this better than us. If anyone's watching this and thinks, well, renal... So is the general opinion that he... maybe he was ill and he went away not wanting to burden the family?
Yeah.
Maybe. And maybe they took umbrage at that and then didn't go to his funeral. Look, who knows?
Maybe whatever breach occurred was one of the cause of why he left anyway. So I mean, that may be the reason. The cause of the breach may have been right at the very, very start, as opposed to people getting umbrage because he seems to just sort of toddle off, doesn't he?
All we know, he seemed to toddle off. All we know for certain is it was nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
Which is the usual thing, really, isn't it?
And again, this family distance at the end.
And not just family, friends.
Yeah.
Nobody knew where he was. Unbelievable.
Yeah, fascinating.
Anyway,
Arsenic poisoning and renal
and
disease.
renal disease chronic.
Mm.
So anyway, you can see his grave at that church. And also Bailey Park, I suppose, is something of his legacy for Crawshay Bailey Jr. The two daughters, at least, were still going. His wife lived until 1909.
Oh, crikey.
And she was actually very much involved in the Cardiff Music Festival. So she was very much a patron of that. And the two daughters, Augusta and Clara, seem to have continued the management, at least, of Maindiff Court, the mansion. But it does seem to have been leased out to various people. Because, you know, you got married, your husband's got Itton Court in Chepstow and Hartpury House in Gloucester. It makes sense, doesn't it, to manage the estate, but go and live in your husband's properties.
Yeah.
And so you got people like Alderman Fred L. Davis. I don't know anything about Alderman Davis, but he lived there for a while. So did Colonel and Mrs. Mansell. That's another good South Wales aristocratic name, Mansell. They were there. And then the Great War hits us, and it becomes a Red Cross hospital, Maindiff Court Mansion.
Oh, right.
And convalescent home. It had 40 patients, and Augusta paid for it all. The upkeep, paid for the beds, paid for everything. And it was mostly initially for British and Belgian. As you can see here, for Christmas 1914. These are Belgians. They had a big party for the birthday of the King of Belgium, Maindiff Court.
Oh, yeah.
They are waving the flag of Belgium.
Yeah.
Or as you had to call them in 1914, I think by a law passed by the King, you had to call them plucky little Belgium.
Plucky little Belgians. Yeah. Plucky little Belgium.
It must have been a nice hospital, though, because one Belgian officer who stayed there was then moved elsewhere, and he said, oh, it's nowhere near as good as Maindiff Court.
Cool.
There's a lovely countryside at Maindiff Court and good beds and warmth, you know. Now I'm on the hard beds somewhere in Hampshire. This is not good. So that's what it became. But by 1920, they were selling the estate off. The Bailey estates were being sold off. So they went, and eventually the mansion itself was sold off, and it was bought by this chap who made his mark in the area. The surname might mean something to you, Goff. This is Sir John Beynon. Now, Sir John Beynon bought Maindiff Court, and he gave Maindiff Court to be to the Monmouthshire Asylum Committee. But he'd also had an old house of the Beynons called the Caldra.
Oh, right.
Lydia Beynon is his mum.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah.
So well done, Sir John. Yeah. What he does, he's bought these properties. He immediately gives them over to the local authority.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it became Lydia Beynon Maternity Hospital,
yes.
didn't it, this?
Yeah.
Sir John gave it for that purpose, but it's now, of course, better known as Celtic Manor.
Yeah, part of the Celtic Manor Golf Resort. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went there years ago in the 70s when it was a restaurant and hotel. Yeah, so we dined there as young teenagers. We all 6 of us all strolled in flares and tank tops.
Did you really?
Yeah, they were lovely. They were really. We decided because it was considered fancy at the time. So let's go to a fancy restaurant. So we all 6 of us trotted in, and they treated us really nicely. I remember being treated very, very. Well, given all that, they were pushing the boats out for these 6 lads and 15 and 16-year-olds who rolled up to have their tea.
I think, Goff, you should put on a pair of flares. You should walk into the Celtic Manor and see if they treat you the same way.
Yeah, see if they remember me.
I'm sure Sir Terry Matthews would be happy to give you the best suite. For old time's sake. But yeah, so good on Sir John Beynon. So yeah, Lydia Beynon was his mum. That's how it all works with the maternity.
Oh, right.
And so he does that there, and for the and for Maindiff, that was handed over to the local asylum committee, the Monmouthshire Asylum Committee. So even at that early stage, it became a mental health hospital.
Yes.
Maindiff Court, but that mansion obviously wasn't really fit for it. So it was knocked down and demolished in 1935. They knocked down the mansion.
Oh, right.
And then they built, as you can see, then, of course, what we know today on that site, the Maindiff Court, as it became the Maindiff Court Military Hospital and Prisoner of War Reception Centre in the Second World War.
Oh, right.
And, of course, now we come on to its it's definitely its most famous resident, would you call it that?
Yeah. This is a complex bit of business.
We like complexity.
We like complexity. So we're going to try and we got a couple of little things to sort of show you and talk around about today. Let me just call up my various gubbins. Now, during the war, if you all remember.
During the war. Very Uncle Albert in Only Fools and Horses.
During the war. Rudolf Hess, the Deputy Reichsführer, took it into his own mind for some peculiar reason that he was going to broker peace between Britain and Germany. Now we know that this wasn't a spur of the moment thing. He'd been planning it since at least the 31st of August in 1940. He met a chap called Karl Haushofer, who apparently told him that King George VI didn't like Churchill very much and dismiss him and send him to Canada. I don't know where he came up with that idea.
Well, they didn't get on originally, George VI and Churchill.
Yeah, but I mean, whether we going to dismiss him and send him to Canada,
I think that's unlikely.
No. So they decided, but what is a good idea if they made touch with either General Ian Hamilton or the Duke of Hamilton, and eventually Hess settles on the Duke of Hamilton that they're going to go and meet with him, and use him as a process of actually brokering this peace deal. Why he ever thought this was a good idea, we will never know. I mean, he wrote a letter to Hess to Hamilton in September 1940, but it was actually intercepted by MI5, and he never actually even got to him. And he didn't see it until like March 1941 when this was all over. Now, obviously, Hamilton never replies to Hess, obviously, because he never get the letter. But for some reason, Hess thinks, oh, well, we'll go ahead with it anyway. We'll keep on with it. We haven't had a reply. By November, he's telling his wife, yes, he's going to proceed with his plan. And he trains to become a Messerschmitt pilot, Messerschmitt BF 110. He has all sort of adaptations done to it. They increase the radio compass, they get oxygen delivery system, they get long-range tanks to be installed. So he's planning on what he's doing and what he's up to. He's going to go for it. And then finally, on the 5:45, on the 10th of May, 1941, he sets off from an airfield in Augsburg and heads in a very zigzag route, basically, across to Britain. After being tracked at various points, they know this plane is coming in. He eventually bails out of the aircraft. The aircraft subsequently crashes. There are still bits of it in the one of the I can't remember which museum this is now, but one of the London museums. The big London museum has a bit of Hess's Messerschmitt where it landed. And they more or less discover him hanging, trying to get out of his parachute. He claims not to be Hess. He claims to have gives a different name altogether. This causes absolute outrage in Germany.
Just a sec off before you go on to the more deeper stuff. There's a great little story about what you just said. There was a local person in Scotland. And he went up to it and he looked at the pilot and he said, that's Rudolf Hess, that is.
Yeah.
Rudolf Hess. It's definitely Rudolf Hess. Look, Rudolf Hess. And they just tell him he's barking mad and send him on his way.
Yeah, that's what, Hess keeps insisting he's somebody called something Horn is his surname.
Right.
Horn, I can't remember the actual bit now. Yeah, so that's Rudolf Hess. No, it's not. No, it just looks like it. Yeah. Hitler apparently let out a strangled cry that could be heard throughout the entire Berghof. When he got informed about it, and at which point again, now they start then this process of claiming that he's nuts, he's mentally unstable, he's deranged, he's deluded, his mental health injuries have been caused by the First World War, and Goering and the propaganda minister Goebbels start spreading this stuff. Only Goebbels isn't sure that it makes matter worse. Because they say that if actually Hess was mentally ill, how did he end up being deputy to the Führer? They also then go, this is again one of these very, very strange things. Hitler apparently secretly orders that Stress will be shot at sight if he ever returned to Germany. And then they put into something, a process called Action Hess. Have you ever heard of this? Action Hess.
No.
And basically, they start rounding up astrologers, faith healers, and occultists. And it's a part of a campaign of propaganda effort by Goebbels to basically denigrate Hess and to make scapegoats for his delusions on the occult practitioners. So those are where these things have got into very peculiar conspiracy theory stuff. Because when they start to debrief Hess, he starts to say some very, very peculiar things. He discovered apparently that there was a supernatural process that was influencing Churchill and to actually hate the Germans. Also, there was something that was inflaming Hitler to make him much more violent as well. And it was all part, again, of your usual Jewish plot who had Jewish supernatural powers that were doing this. And so people start to realize that there's something else going on here. Hess is actually not in quite, never necessarily stable. He's defined eventually after much examination as being psychologically unstable, not insane, but psychologically unstable. There are stories that when he's talking about all this occult things, which apparently his wife was much more involved in than he was. So she thinks she had an influence on some of this sort of occult thinking, which as he became more and more off balance psychologically, he started to adapt onto this. So this is the idea that, apparently Ian Fleming at one point, who was in naval intelligence, suggests that they get Aleister Crowley to go and interview him. Our old friend Aleister Crowley, a great big personal pal of Viscount Evan Tredegar, who is currently living at Tredegar House at this point. So eventually, after trotting him around various places, they pop him into the Tower of London for a while. Then they take him to Mitchett Place in Surrey, which is a fortified mansion designated Camp Z. Camp Z. So they do all these very tests. And they decide he's mentally unstable.
But the British must have been thinking, what on earth's going on at this point? Not every day that the number 2 of your sworn enemy drops into your country, into your lap.
Well, quite, yeah.
What on earth?
It is. It's something which is it's so erratic that you can't really tell what's going on. Yeah. He attempts a suicide at one point while he was at Mitchett Place by jumping over a staircase and fracturing his femur. And his behavior becomes progressively erratic. And that's why he becomes declared as being mentally ill.
Yeah.
Some people suggest he was putting it on, that he was faking amnesia and things like this, because apparently you could be repatriated under the terms of Geneva Convention if you were considered to be mentally ill.
Well, he doesn't want to go back there after. No. Yeah.
So eventually they move him to Maindiff Court Hospital on June the 26th in 1942. And he remains there for the next 3 years. Apparently they chose it because it was added security and needed fewer guards. But he gets a very, very sort of free run of the place. It's not quite as you'd expect, a sort of detention centre. It's more or less like a sort of open prison. He goes regularly for days out. He sits there, striding through the countryside always with a guard with him. He does painting of the area. He actually visits various local members of the gentry. Apparently, he pops into Lady Llanover every so often for a cup of tea. There are reports, I think, mentions. Is it Robin Bryan's? Mentions in one of his autobiographies, I'm not sure it was the published and withdrawn one or the unpun, that apparently there were 4 people given charge of keeping an eye on Hess while he was Maindiff Court, one of which was Lady Llanover, another of which was Evan Lord Tredegar. Again, this connection with Hess keeps cropping up with. We've seen a list dating from 1931 in which Hess, Ernst Röhm, and Evan Morgan and another, I can't remember. Can you remember who the other guy was, Paul?
The Haushofer, who you've mentioned earlier on.
And that's a meeting which takes place at Bad Weizes in 1931. So there is a connection with there. And Bryans makes a very enigmatic remark at one point. He said, isn't it interesting that Rudolf Hess gets sent to the county of his great friend Evan Morgan? So there were some pre-war connections going on with them between this situation. So
there's
an odd one.
Yeah, there's a lot of of sort of stories about it. We can say the facts here of what we got and let people make up their own mind about this particular
Yeah.
Evan Hess thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Rudolf Hess, according to Robin Bryan's, Evan Tredegar's friend, who wrote about Evan a lot, said that Evan Morgan knew Rudolf Hess back in the early 30s.
Yeah.
And Evan would go to Bad Wiese. It's a sort of a spa town, which makes perfect sense. We know he did go to Bavaria quite a bit, Evan. Whether he met Rudolf Hess there, we don't know. But Robin Bryan said he did, and
Yes.
said that they were friends. So that's what we've got that there.
That's what we got.
As for the letter, the list, which was sent, that's never been authenticated, of course. We don't know whether that's a joke, whether that's someone has written it. We don't know anything about that. We can't say that's true or not.
It's a very obscure joke if you're going to try and pull that one, because I mean, it's so vague. It's not. I can't see it as a joke or a duping. I think it's not authenticated, but
whether it happened or
what's the motivation to do that?
Yeah. But putting on my historian Stern hat, we don't have that as an authenticated piece of evidence that would satisfy an historian. But it's an oddity. It's
an oddity. It's like a lot of these things are things that are floating around in the background at this time. But the military intelligence and things was particularly amateurish in a way.
Yes.
You had to be in the right school to get it, and they'd ask you to do a bit of spying for them. We know that Viscount Evan Tredegar was involved with military intelligence, officially and unofficially between the wars, mostly as an informer for MI5. So it's a if you're going to pop someone in with a military intelligence connection, he does make a reasonable assumption that he could be one of the people that's keeping an eye on him.
The other little bits, the two other things about all this is there's no evidence at all that Hess went to Tredegar House. I've seen that written. There's no evidence whatsoever for that. However, there were rumours in Abergavenny at the time, which were told by two people who were boys at the time, and one who was slightly more than a boy at the time, that they had heard rumours that Lord Tredegar had visited Maindiff Court.
Yeah.
So, although
it's possible. Evan's
that's a possibility.
Yeah, Evan's got this military intelligence connection, and he's also a practicing occultist, which they seem to think is an element of what Hess's thinking is.
Exactly.
So if you're going to get someone to draw Hess out, you've got a possible previous connection between the wars. You've got the occult background, and Evan could just feed it straight into whatever military intelligence he was currently either informing or attached to. So yeah, it's a very intriguing setup. I got a nice little bit of Hess's sort of routine, and what he got up to by a chap called Joe Clifford, who was one of Hess's guards at Maindiff. He's passed away now, sadly. But he told the Abergavenny Chronicle in 2009. So I remember one of my first impressions of Hess was how tall he was, the arrogant manner in which he held himself, and how he usually walked with a semi-goose step, throwing his feet out. He seemed to think that we were more his servants than guards. At night, I would be posted outside his bedroom, and sometimes Hess would come out of his bedroom and walk into the garden. I would walk behind him, but he would never talk to me. He was a rather haughty and aloof man, and I think he felt the likes of me were beneath him. Even though he could speak English, he very rarely spoke, except to the officers whom he sometimes dined with. He never talked to any of the guards. Yeah, I just want to say, I never saw Hess behave strangely. I never observed him speaking to himself or staring strangely. But I do know that in February 1945, he made a suicide attempt. This is the second suicide attempt, by stabbing himself twice with a bread knife, but he only scratched himself with it. So most days, Hess would sit on the veranda reading, writing and drawing. He would normally wear a blue sports coat, grey flannel trousers and sandals in the summer, and in the winter, a long blue overcoat. Now and again, he would dress up in his uniform, the uniform he flew over in from Germany. So he's still around in it. Yeah, it's very, very odd.
By the way, there was a lovely little thing. You mentioned Haushofer earlier on.
Yes.
His son, Albrecht Haushofer, who was later executed by Hitler in 1945 as being part of the resistance, Albrecht Haushofer used to write to Hess's wife. Ilse. Yeah. And of course, they weren't allowed to know, they could write to Hess, but they weren't allowed to know where he was kept. And Hess would write long letters about the countryside and even the soil. So maybe he was doing this in a clever way.
Yeah.
Countryside, describing the countryside. And Albrecht Haushofer was a geographer, and he knew about soil.
Oh,
And
yeah.
apparently he looked at that letter and he said to Ilse, I'm willing to bet it's either a place in Kent, in that country, or Abergavenny.
Oh, gosh.
Your husband is being kept, because the letters describe the landscape so well that this biographer who knew all about soil thought it could only be Abergavenny or this other place.
That's interesting,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. So again, that argues that how mentally unstable Hess was has always been something of a question. You can't really tell how much he was swinging it or not. Yeah. There's another odd little connection between Hess and Wales as well, which is mentioned by the historian Phil Carradine.
Yeah. I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. Well, apparently Hess's father, Carl Hess, lived in Cardiff for a while. He married his first wife there. She sadly passed away, and she's actually his first wife is buried in the churchyard at Micklestone of Edu on the outskirts of Cardiff. So after his wife died, Carl Hess goes back to Germany, marries again, and has Rudolf.
I've heard that, and I've heard it said by a lot of people. There's one slight problem.
Oh, no, what's this?
Karl Hess was not Rudolf Hess's dad. Rudolf Hess's dad was a man called Johann Fritz Hess.
Oh, God, no.
And Hess is a relatively common name in Germany.
Oh, how
Elizabeth Mackey used to work on the Tredegar estate.
Oh, right.
She's buried at its Lower Macken, is where that church is.
Yeah.
So the idea, you've got Karl Hess, who has this Welsh girl, then goes back to Germany, marries again, and then his son is Rudolf Hess. Is this wonderful little thing? Because you could say Hess was in Abergavenny. Did he know that just down the road, really, a relative was not by blood, but a relative was buried?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. If you look at it, if you look at the paperwork, it doesn't really work, does it?
No. Oh,
his dad was Johann Fritz and not Karl.
Oh, how disappointing!
But it's still a lovely little story. I've heard that. That was a lovely little legend in the area for years. But I don't know.
Karl could have been in like a sort of nickname, family nickname.
I am not an expert in Hess genealogy.
We really can't say that.
No, I
was just clinging to it as a possibility.
We love that story. Don't make us stop.
Oh no! Even then, another Evan Morgan connection would have been fascinating.
I know. Tredegar estate connection. It's also tantalising, but possibly not true.
Possibly not. Aiming on probably not correct. Yeah. How very annoying.
Well, we have to talk about these stories. This is what this podcast is all about.
Well, yeah, I mean,
stories and tales.
Stories and these are historical stories that were circulated and believed in and whatever. So who do we know? There's a lovely little bit if you do have a little bit of evidence of Hess, possibly of Hess's stay at it. Let me see if I can just find a little bit to bring it up so I can possibly see what we're looking for. Occasionally, the local pub would send up bottles of beer for Rudolf. And one of the bottles was returned with his signature on it. And where's the picture now? Have I got the picture up? Ah, yes, here we are. Let me see if I can get back onto you and I can sign it and so I can show it to you. There we go. So this is the bottle that was turned back. Can you see it?
Yeah.
I'll read it in a bit. And there we have Rudolf Hess's
30th of May, 1943.
Yeah.
So they've sent him the beer and he sent that back.
Yeah.
For his signature.
Yeah. Well, purported to be his signature. Now, some people have said that there's a degree of doubt about it. And perhaps it was done as a joke by one of the guards and all this.
I think it is his signature, Goff. Well, I think it is his signature.
Well, let me show you this. You've got this. Remember that very peculiar R.
It's unusual.
At the front of Rudolf, okay?
Yeah.
Now, we do have here an example of an actual Hess signature.
Right.
Okay.
Remembering the R at the start.
Yeah. So remembering that very peculiar R, this crops up. This is available on Wikipedia, on his Wikipedia entry page, if you want to have a look. So this is Rudolf Hess's signature.
Oh, crikey.
Now, look at that R.
Yeah.
At the front.
It's very similar.
Well, I'd say it's the same, factually the same. Yeah.
We talked about this, didn't we?
So remember that R? Let's go back. Just go back to the other picture and have a little look.
If it was the guards playing a joke, they've done their homework, haven't they?
They certainly have. They've not just written, scribbled on it. They possibly even forged it if they have forged it. But look at that R.
Yeah, I think it probably is Rudolf
I
Hess's
think
signature.
it probably is Hess's signature. I think it's
Yeah.
more than likely to say that. Yeah. So eventually, obviously, he's out of there. He's back at Germany after the war, and he winds up in Spandau Ballet, the Spandau Ballet,
Spandau
Spandau
Ballet.
prison,
Spandau Ballet, yeah.
doing a bit of ballet, and yeah, it's still purporting to be amnesiac. And then again, you get all these conspiracy theories that it's not Rudolf, it's a Rudolf Hess, it's a double, it's a setup. These things were floating around even about Abergavenny, that it wasn't, that Maindiff Court, that he wasn't ever Hess, it was somebody
it was a Welsh doctor, wasn't it? I read a book by him, Hugh Thomas.
Yeah, and but there were discrepancies about bodily scars. There discrepancy about diet. He's supposed to be a vegetarian, and he's eating meat and drink, but apparently a test was done recently on a known blood sample.
Yeah,
of Hess that was taken at Maindiff Court, I believe, and it is Hess.
Yeah, it is.
There's a teeniest, like 1% possibility that it isn't. So it's
they thought they'd blown it when was it 2011 or 2012? The German government had Hess's remains cremated. And they thought, we've missed the chance. But there was this American doctor who'd taken this smear of blood.
Yeah.
I think at Maindiff Court.
Yes, at Maindiff Court.
And yes, it was Rudolf Hess. There was no double. That was put to bed in 2019.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a good story. But, but
But
nevertheless.
it tells you also the mindset of what intelligence was about as well, because we know doubles were used regularly. There were doubles of Churchill, there were doubles of Montgomery, there were all sorts of doubles floating around. So the idea that you might do that, you would keep him there because he'd actually, that theory was that he died, because they knew there was attempts that he died, and they replaced him with a double for the propaganda of keeping the Deputy Reichsführer as he was there. But no, they won the case.
No.
The case at all.
Still quite a story for it said in 1945 when Hess left Maindiff to go to Nuremberg, of course, for the trials, that finally the public were allowed to go in the grounds of Maindiff Court again. They had been, he could go, up the Skirrid and whatever, but the public weren't allowed to be that close.
Yeah.
And afterwards they could finally go in and have a look around and but there we are. So definitely a very notable part of South Wales history, I think I'd call that.
Yeah.
Maindiff Court, and it continued and still is with those same buildings, of course, with a few additions. Because, of course, he was in the new Maindiff Court, wasn't he? Built after the demolition of the mansion in 1935.
Yeah.
So we have these two little mysteries, really. What on earth Crawshay Bailey Jr., why he had to vanish, and what Rudolf Hess was actually up to. Why did he think this was going to work? Why did he think that flying into Scotland, he could stop the war single-handedly?
Yeah.
Not a clue.
No.
Not a clue.
No, I mean, I think it was an unstable personality who had become delusional about a number of occult things that his wife was involved in, and goes for it.
Lots of stories, though, about people who knew he was coming to Scotland. There are all these rumours and conspiracy theories about the Duke of Kent, another Evan Morgan friend.
Yeah.
And, by the way, Evan Morgan, the day before all this happened, I checked what he was up to before Hess landed. Yeah. No, Evan didn't know any of this. We're just playful now. Don't worry. But Evan, the day before Hess landed, announced in the paper that he wasn't available in public for the foreseeable future.
Oh, my goodness.
Ill health, he said, but it's an interesting timing. I can't be reached.
But also, Evan was a cousin of the Duke of Hamilton as well, wasn't he?
Connection.
There's a picture of him standing by the Duke of Hamilton where he's been misnamed in one of the photos.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
It's very interesting little quirks.
It's all fun and games.
The Hess story, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm not sure where we will go next, but I thought it'd be nice. I thought it was nice to do Maindiff Court.
Yeah.
Because that was interesting. I looked at Llanvoist House and some of the other Bailey properties, but it just seemed to be a little bit more meat with Maindiff, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, there we are. I've got to ask you, Goff, before we go, for our regular viewers and listeners, how's the bed? Because when we left you, it was a pile of sticks, and I imagined some hammock kind of.
It was a sort of hammock in sticks. It's fine now. I have a new one. It's very comfy and very cozy. Fortunately, the old one is stuck just here.
Oh.
But I can't put it out. I'll be able to put it out the back because it's so wet, and I have to arrange for it to be removed yet to get taken away. So I have to wait for a dry period so I can arrange for it to be removed. Yes, I'm not at the most salubrious on that side of the room. That's why I'm photographing this bit.
Perfectly fair enough.
It's a joy to lie down now. It's a joy.
You don't miss it till it's gone, do you?
You know?
Well, we know one thing, I think it's safe to say. Rudolf Hess was a lot more comfortable at Maindiff than he was at Spandau.
Yes.
And
yeah.
certainly more than he was at Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Goff. I think that's
pleasure as always, Ulfluff.
Always good. Please join us again. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed and you want to subscribe, you will be number 666. So there we are.
Yeah, the subscriber of the beast.
You want to be the subscriber of the beast? On your head be it. We're actually putting off subscribers here, aren't we? We are rubbish at this YouTube thing. We really are rubbish.
Yeah, we're never going to be influencers, are we?
No, no. But we plow on lively anyway. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.